Do you want me to say, call a roll call, or do you just want me to say there's quorum, Madam Clerk?
I can speak to roll call if you'd like, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we are good to go.
Okay, welcome everyone to our October 22nd, 2020 public meeting with regards to DC charges. And I want to call this meeting to order. Our agenda was published on our website for those to view, and also council. At this time, I will call on the clerk to do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We have all members here except for Councillors Burley, O'Leary, Soever. We have Councillor Thompson joining us on behalf of Councillor Burley.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Clerk, and others may join as we go through the meeting, which they can do. Okay, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest with the county councillors to this meeting? Okay, if one does arise, then you can declare it at that time. So I will call this meeting to order, and as I did before, I will certainly like to introduce Randy Switzer. He's our Director of Planning, and Kevin Wepler, the Director of Corporate Services, who will be providing an overview of the proposed changes that Council is considering to the development charge bylaw in order to encourage more rental housing, nonprofit housing, and additional secondary housing units. Stefan Kay from Hempson Consulting, I would like to also introduce. Hempson Consulting is assisting the county with the proposed DC charge bylaw and will help with to answer any of the questions that we may have today. I guess I'll pass this over to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. This is a statutory public meeting being held under the Development Charges Act. The public meeting is required prior to council considering any proposed changes to the development charges bylaws. In accordance with the Act, public meeting was advertised in the Owen Sound Sun-Times on October 1st, 2020. Notice of the public meeting was also posted on the county website on September 28th, 2020, along with a copy of the staff background report and a copy of the proposed amendments to the development charges bylaws. A copy of the proposed deferral policy was also posted to the website. We have received no correspondence regarding the proposed development charges bylaw prior to the public meeting.
Okay. Mr. Switzer, would you like to start there?
Thank you. Thank you, Warden McQueen, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll provide an overview of the proposed changes to the development charges bylaw that council is considering, as the warden indicated, to encourage more rental housing, nonprofit housing, and additional dwelling units by exempting these developments from a county development charge. There are other proposed changes that we'll also highlight. These proposed changes align with the policy direction in Recolor Gray being the county's official plan. As noted previously, Hempson Consulting has assisted the county with the proposed changes as they are the county's current development charges consultant. Stefan from Hempson Consulting is connected with us today to help answer any questions regarding the proposed changes. So there is an ongoing need for more affordable and attainable housing throughout Gray County, and more importantly, rental housing, nonprofit housing, and additional secondary dwelling units. The current average vacancy rate for rental housing is quite low, with it being approximately 1.9%, and the current provincial average is about 2%. And what's considered a healthy housing market vacancy rate is considered to be between 3 to 4%. Employers are also indicating that their employees are finding it difficult to find affordable and attainable housing near their place of work. And newcomers to Gray County are also indicating that it's difficult to find housing options that are affordable. So the proposed changes to the DC bylaws would allow, for example, nonprofit housing providers and developers to reduce their overall development costs, which could make rental projects, affordable and attainable housing projects more viable and may allow projects to be constructed earlier than originally anticipated. It would also free up capital costs, which could potentially be invested in more affordable housing builds or adding more units to a proposed building. If there were more rental housing options, some people may also sell their existing homes and move into a rental unit to either downsize or to free up equity in their house, which in turn frees up more housing supply. So this really forms the basis as to why County Council is considering these proposed changes to the DC bylaws to add as another tool or incentive to help encourage more affordable and attainable housing throughout Grey County. So just to provide some context, in December of 2019, the province proclaimed some of the changes to the Development Charges Act. And in July of this year, the province made some further changes to the Act, which have now been proclaimed. And all the changes now came into effect on September 18th, 2020. The Development Charges Act allows municipalities to exempt certain types of development from development charges. Certain types of development are already exempt under the current county development charge bylaws. For example, additional secondary dwelling units that are constructed either within or attached to an existing house are exempt from a county development charge. Non-residential developments such as commercial and industrial developments are also exempt. So I'll just provide a bit more detail regarding the specific proposed changes that Council is considering. So the first one is exempting all new purpose-built rental units. So this exemption would apply to any rental housing units that are designed and built for long-term accommodation and would include such housing types as rental apartments, rental townhouses, or rental dorm-style units. A definition for purpose-built rental housing has been included in the proposed amendments, and this aligns with the definition under the Development Charges Act, which identifies 4 or more dwelling units, all of which are intended for use as rented residential premises. So in order to ensure that these developments stay as rentals over a period of time, for example, we're suggesting 20 years at minimum, staff are recommending that an agreement be entered into with the owner that would be registered on title. For the rental units that have either been built or are under construction, it's estimated that an average over the past few years of a total of 25 rental units per year have been constructed. This equates to approximately $100,000 in development charge revenue per year that would not be collected if exempting rental builds. This loss of revenue is considered minor if it will help result in more rental housing being created. So the second overview, I guess, of the proposed changes, or the main highlights of the changes, are exempting all residential housing developments that are constructed by non-profit housing organizations, as well as development projects supported through funding, either provided by our county housing department or the National Housing Strategy through CMHC. By exempting these units, staff hope this will result in more affordable housing being created throughout the county. This exemption could include housing built by Habitat for Humanity, Community Living, the Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation, the Blue Mountains Attainable Housing Corporation, and other nonprofit housing providers. There have also been some private residential developments that have received funding from the county in the past through the Investment in Affordable Housing Program. A great example is the Durham project in the town of Durham and municipality of West Grey. For developments that receive funding from also the National Housing Strategy, these would also be exempt from a county development charge. So a definition for nonprofit housing development has been included in the proposed bylaw changes. And again, this aligns with the definition under the Development Charges Act, and would also include the other types of development as previously noted. Staff are aware of just over 100 units being proposed in the near future by nonprofit housing providers. If nonprofit housing were exempted, this would result in approximately 450 to 500,000 not being collected, which would likely be spread out again over the next few years. Again, staff feel that this is a minor loss considering the overall benefits that are provided by having more affordable housing options for Grey County residents. Staff also hope that by nonprofits saving on development charge costs, that these savings can then be used to construct even more affordable housing units in the future. The third category of proposed changes is exempting detached additional dwelling units or secondary units or basement apartments, whatever you want to call them. So the current county development charge bylaw exempts additional dwelling units that are within or attached to an existing dwelling or an existing house. The proposed amendment would also exempt detached additional dwelling units on the same property where there's an existing single detached house, as well as proposed additional dwelling units within, attached, or detached to a new residential unit that's being proposed. So for example, if a property owner wanted to construct a detached dwelling unit in their backyard as a laneway housing unit, or construct a detached garage with an additional dwelling unit built above or attached to that garage, then a county development charge would not apply. At the time of preparing these proposed bylaw changes, the changes to the DC Act regarding additional dwelling units had not been proclaimed yet, and the regulations had not been approved. The province proclaimed those changes on September 18th of this year, and therefore specific additional dwelling units are automatically exempt from a development charge, both county and municipal development charges, in accordance with the Development Charge Act and the regulations. We were previously proposing to align the proposed changes to the bylaws with the proposed changes at that time under the Act, and now that those changes are in effect, we will make sure that they align with the changes that are made to the DC Act. Based on the current exemptions and the exemptions now approved under the Development Charges Act, we anticipate that this could result in a total loss revenue of approximately $75,000 to $100,000 each year. The next category of proposed changes is what we're calling a development charge deferral policy. So throughout the past few years, the county has accepted development charge deferral requests for several projects, with the notion that these projects were providing more affordable and attainable housing options, and in some cases, accessible housing units. These included things like life lease developments, as well as purpose-built rental conversion projects. The proposed changes to the bylaws would include a reference to a deferral policy that would be created, which would outline criteria for when the county would consider entering into a deferral agreement. Staff are recommending that the deferral policy be a separate document to allow council to amend the policy without triggering an update to the actual bylaws. It should be noted that the province's recent changes to the Development Charges Act requires municipalities to defer development charges for purpose-built rental housing, nonprofit housing, and institutional developments. So based on the proposed exemptions that we're proposing in the bylaws for rental housing and nonprofit housing, and based on the county's current DC bylaws, which exempts non-residential developments, including institutional uses, the required deferrals under the Act would no longer be applicable to the county's development charges, should these proposed changes to the bylaws be approved by council. In order to consider other deferrals beyond the proposed exemptions or beyond the deferrals required under the Development Charges Act, staff are recommending that the policy identify other types of development that could be considered. And what we're proposing are housing units that meet the Accessibility for Ontario Disabilities Act standards, other rental developments that would not be eligible for an exemption, such as, say, for example, a triplex rental building, as well as condo apartments or life lease developments. So the proposal would be that if you meet those criteria, any of those developments, you could then qualify for a development charge deferral until time of occupancy. For developments that meet that criteria, a deferral agreement would be required, which would need to be registered on title. Council could still consider deferral requests if it does not meet that criteria through a written request that will be brought forward for council's consideration. Council can also charge interest on the funds deferred, and to be consistent with the interest rate that council approved for the development charge rate freezes as required by the Act, it is proposed that the same interest rate be applied to deferrals, which is currently 3.5%. This is in line with Canada's prime rate, as well as the county's average indexing of development charge rate increases over the past 3 years. The fifth category of proposed changes is around redevelopment credits. So the proposed changes to the bylaws also include considering credits for redevelopment projects. So for example, if a commercial building is being converted to residential units, a credit would be provided in the amount of what the commercial DC rate would have been if a county non-residential rate was applied to the commercial space. And this would be discounted from the new residential charge. The calculated non-residential rates identified in the latest development charge background study was just under $34 per square meter in 2016. And using the index rates, this would equate to just under $38 per square meter for 2020. So although the county has never collected a non-residential charge in the past, this credit recognized that there's at least a like for like in the amount of services provided by the county for the current commercial use, as it will be for the future residential use, and therefore is considered a more fair approach. In terms of actual building conversions that have occurred from commercial space to residential space in the past, county staff don't have an exact number, but we know that there have been a few conversions over the past several years. We may also see more requests in the future to convert commercial space to residential space, given that there is less demand for commercial space compared to an increased demand in housing units, and this has been further intensified by the pandemic. Next category of changes is exempting development charges for approved community improvement plan projects. So County Council supported a community improvement plan program last year, and local municipalities are working on either updates to their existing community improvement plans or working on adopting a new community improvement plan to align with the county's program. The CIP program is designed to provide incentives for encouraging certain types of development. This includes increasing the attainable housing stock, promoting vacant and brownfield developments, downtown revitalization, as well as adaptive reuse of commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings. Staff are recommending that when a county development charge applies to a development that has received a community improvement plan grant or incentive through the local CIPs, that these projects be exempted from a county development charge. This would help to further encourage the types of priority developments that County Council would like to see happen throughout Grey County by providing an additional incentive. This would also align with the recent changes made to the county's fees and services bylaw to recognize that any fees and services such as planning application fees could also be waived or exempted or reduced in accordance with the community improvement plan. It's too early to tell what revenue impact this would have. However, staff will monitor this as part of the overall community improvement plan monitoring. The last highlight I'll identify are amendments based on the Development Charge Act changes. So the proposed bylaw amendments have been drafted to align with the changes to the Development Charges Act where applicable. There are a number of other changes that have made to the Development Charge Act, and these include additional eligible services that municipalities can collect a development charge for, such as childcare and early year programs, housing services, services related to proceedings under the Provincial Offences Act, and services related to emergency preparedness, just to name a few. The Development Charge Act changes also remove the 10% discount for eligible services. So the county can consider these further changes as part of the next 5-year update to the county development charges bylaws. This will occur in 2021, that review will commence, and the bylaws have to be passed by January 1st, 2022 for that 5-year update. So those are some of the changes to the act that council can consider further through future bylaw changes. So that provides an overview of the proposed changes to the county's development charges bylaws. In terms of next steps, so following this public meeting, staff will summarize any comments received and will bring back a final revised version of the bylaws for council's consideration before the end of this year. As noted, in terms of comments received, we haven't received any to date, but we will summarize any in a future staff report if received after the public meeting. We did receive one request from Georgian Communities to connect to today's meeting, but they noted that they were just wanting to connect to stay informed about the proposed changes and did not have any specific comments at this time. Unfortunately, they were not able to connect today, but we'll send them a link to the recorded public meeting just so they have access to that. So Before I open up to any questions, Kevin or Stefan, did I miss anything, or is there something else further that you guys would like to add?
I'll go ahead first. Randy, you did a very good job as always in presenting all the changes and what we're proposing. And we believe as staff, Randy and I, that this is the direction that council has sought in trying to increase affordable and attainable housing in the county. And these are some of the tools that were put forward as something to consider. So thank you.
Yeah, and I have nothing to add. I mean, this is a very comprehensive staff report, and Randy's done a great job in summarizing the main points within it.
Okay, well, thanks, Randy and Kevin and Stefan for all those comments. And just going back to the Madam Clerk before I open it up for questions from council, just for clarity, is anybody able to link in as far as the public, or has there been anybody link in as far as the public goes?
There was only one request, as Randy noted, and the gentleman reached out to us just prior to the meeting saying that something has come up and he is unable to attend the meeting, but did request a copy of the recording, which Rob will send him.
Yep, okay, thank you for that. And if the viewing public wishes to send comments in, is there a certain time period? Do you want to speak to that, Randy, at all? Or?
Yeah, we'd recommend providing those comments as soon as possible. We're hoping to bring forward a report, probably the second meeting in Committee of the Whole, which would be November 26th. Our reports are due 2 weeks prior to that. So if we could have any comments submitted the first week in November, that would be greatly appreciated. We'll summarize any of those comments that we do receive and bring those forward for council's consideration.
Great, thank you, Randy, for that. And you always do a good job. At this time, I'm going to open it up to County Council. And are there any questions from the virtual floor?
I see Councillor Mackey.
Okay, go ahead, Scott. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Warden, and thanks very much, Randy, for the report. It's important for Grey County to develop more affordable housing and housing in general. My question, I guess, for clarification around the exemption as opposed to the deferral. There's a number of our municipalities. There's private businesses that are, building, fourplexes and that sort of thing for primarily seniors that are wanting to downsize. So, under this proposal, would they be exempt or deferred? And if they're not exempt, what would the rationale for that be? Thank you.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Warden, they meet the definition of a rental. So if they're proposed as rental units and they meet that definition of 4 or more housing units that's currently being proposed, I guess, to align with the Development Charges Act, then they would be potentially exempt from a county development charge. So if they're proposing a new fourplex and those are going to be rental units, that would then qualify for an exemption. And as mentioned, what we would do then is enter into an agreement with that landowner that would be registered on title, and that would ensure that those rental units remain as rental units for at least a period of time. And we're suggesting at least a 20-year period.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Are there any other questions?
Councillor Keaveney.
Go ahead, Councillor Keaveney.
Thanks very much, Mr. Warden, and thanks, Randy, for your presentation. You mentioned a couple of times life leases that could qualify for exemptions. I'm wondering about land leases, if they would fit in the same category.
Great question. And I think that's something that we can definitely explore in terms of how we structure that definition for life lease versus land lease. To me, there's definitely both products available and are being developed in our communities in terms of life leases within the actual units themselves, or leasing just the land and owning the units on top. So we'll explore that further for sure, and make sure that the definition is clear in terms of whether or not that includes both. I guess I'll throw it out there to council. Is that something that would be interested, council, in terms of looking at both those options for deferrals?
Any thoughts out there?
If I can jump in, I think yeah, definitely should be, because as you say, yes, we do have both underway and potentially underway in our municipality.
Okay, Randy, you may take that back then.
Definitely, thank you.
Okay, I see Councillor Mackey again.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Just, Randy, can you provide me with what a full definition of a life lease is, please? And how, how they operate. I don't know a lot about them.
Yeah, so it varies actually in terms of the arrangement, and usually it's in some cases it'll be a building that someone has developed and built, and they're leasing units within that building, and the leases allows them to remain in that unit for a period of time, and in some cases they pay for basically having security and leasing that unit over a longer period. As Councillor Keaveney's indicated, there's also models whereby they're leasing the land, but owning the actual unit that's on top of that land. And that's similar to, for those familiar, Park Bridge uses that model where they lease the land and you own the unit on top of the land. So you're basically getting a mortgage for the land, for the unit itself, but you're actually leasing the land from Park Bridge. It's similar to almost like a condo style in that you, in some cases, you may not necessarily own the land that your unit sits on, but you own the unit. So it's just another model, that I know that Park Bridge utilizes. So there's definitely different models out there in terms of life lease, but the intent is that you have access to unit, you either own the unit in some cases, or you're leasing it over the remainder of your life. And you enter into agreement with in some cases the building owner or the landowner in order to occupy that unit.
Thanks for that explanation, Randy, and I hope I wasn't the only one that needed it. Thanks.
I think Meaford has been doing them, and Barb will have coffee with you someday and explain more.
We're definitely seeing more and more of them across the county for sure. And as you noted, Warden, in Meaford, in Blue Mountains and Old Sound and other communities, they're definitely something that is being more attractive for folks, especially for those that are sell their units, their existing house, and looking at a different option and being able to utilize that equity from the sale of their house, but then also guaranteeing a space where they can live out the remainder of their years.
Almost like buying space.
Yeah.
All right. Councillor Keaveney.
May I ask an additional question, Mr.
Sure.
Warden? Thanks very much. And Randy, I'm wondering, I know that these exemptions and deferrals and so on will certainly apply to developments going forward, but if there's any developments underway right now, is there any possibility of working with those particular developers to help them come back and qualify for this if they've already paid DC charges?
Ready?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan or Kevin, jump in, but I think if they've already paid development charges, there won't be an opportunity then in terms of providing any credits or rebates based on, because at the time the building permits were issued, that's what our county development charge bylaw indicated. We know that there's some developments that are waiting for some of these changes to occur, and some of those are rentals. And so what we've suggested, because the Development Charges Act requires them to enter into a deferral agreement until the DC is then do a time of occupancy, is that we would enter into those deferral agreements with them and then look at language to indicate whether or not, if the bylaw were to change, what then potentially they would owe in a development charge should it change, should council decide to change it. So we are trying to work with some that are within the process, but for those that have already been built, or for those that have already paid a previous county development charge, there's a lot less flexibility there that we would have to provide a credit back to those folks. I don't know if that makes sense, Stefan or Kevin, if you have any further comments there.
No, I mean, I'm not a municipal lawyer, but my understanding is there's no legal mechanism to apply these bylaw provisions retroactively, and I've certainly never seen it done.
Okay, Shirley, does that help?
Yes, no, I was just thinking if any developments were sort of underway, under construction at the moment, if there was any way to work with those folks. So we'll leave that up to Randy.
We just hope it encourages them to reinvest.
Exactly.
Right. I think I see the Deputy Warden's hand. Councillor Hicks.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Randy, I have a question about the size of units, and I know that more and more people are talking about getting out of the way of the building code, which allows for a very small footprint. I forget what that footprint is. Is there anything still in our official plan that places a further limit on size beyond what is allowed by the building code?
Great question, Councillor Hicks. And we actually, through our new official plan, we identified just that. We identified through policy the recommendation that we just let the Ontario Building Code dictate the size of the unit. And so, yeah, we don't have anything specific in the official plan to say it has to be at least this size. We just let the Ontario Building Code dictate what size that could be and what's appropriate, what's safe. And it can be quite small in terms of what can actually be built under the Ontario Building Code in terms of square footage. Obviously, want to make sure that those spaces, like I said, are safe and are functional and livable, especially in our environment and in our communities. But no doubt they can go a lot smaller than what we've historically had in some of our zoning bylaws, which had, say, 1,000 square feet or even 1,200 square feet. In some cases, it can go 400 square feet or even less in some cases under the Ontario Building Code. So we're just saying, let the Ontario Building Code dictate how small we can go.
Thank you.
And thanks for that question. As I understand, a kitchen has to be a certain size, a bathroom has to be a certain size, and all the components of a house, which add up to a larger size unit. And that's how I was explained to it a few years back.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Any other questions from County Council? Anything else from staff or anything? Okay, so I see no other questions then, and that, well, I want to thank everyone for your attendance today and those from the viewing public or who will be viewing this after the fact. And seeing there's no other questions, I need a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Deputy Warden Hicks, do I need a seconder, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Okay, who wants to be the? I don't hear anybody. Come on now, Councillor.
I see Councillor Mackey. Yeah.
Well, I got Councillor Keaveney there. The hand came up there. So moved by Deputy Warden and Hicks and second by Councillor Keaveney that we adjourn. And anybody opposed to that? That is carried. And the time will be, as I guess, almost 2:35. So thank you.